Well, I hope you enjoyed the meditation. We normally do notices now and a collection, but of course we can't do that. We're going to have to run on our reserves for now until we can come back again together in our meetings. Anyway, today, yes, it's the 172nd birthday of modern spiritualism. Critically, spiritualism is founded upon the truth that our spirit survives beyond that we wrongly call death. We accept that the work of mediums over many years has proven that we can communicate with those who are in the spirit realms, our loved ones, friends, and maybe just acquaintances. And this was first proven on the communication on March the 31st, 1848, when a spirit of a murdered peddler communicated with the Fox family at the cottage in Hydesville, New York State, during the evening of that day. It's a very important time because, of course, the story's been told many times, but unfortunately incorrectly, because for many years the original record of this, which was a pamphlet produced by a lawyer turned journalist, E. Lewis, who, having heard of the events in Hydesville, travelled to Hydesville and took witness statements on the 11th of 12th of April, almost less than 2 weeks after the events. And there were many witnesses to what occurred. And he had them certified, drawn up, and issued a pamphlet about his findings. And that is the true record of what occurred. And there are a number of things which have been added in, that there was a statement of Mr. Splitfoot, and that the name Charles Rosner turned up, but neither of those events occurred. And some of the other blandishments and aggrandizements of the story have crept in, mainly because of the elder sister who wasn't present, Leah Fox. Leah Fox was actually living in Rochester. She didn't hear about it at first, and after 30 days she raced back to Hydesville to be there. She was 20 plus years older than the two girls who were involved in the rappings, and a considerable age difference. And over the years she tried to, all the Fox sisters made themselves much younger than they were as they passed through life, but Leah even more importantly. So when she issued a book called The Missing Link in Modern Spiritualism in 1885, she was one of the little children, placing herself as if she was part of the events when she wasn't. And the book changed the nature of what occurred, and it introduced you to Mr. Splitfoot, Leah Fox having done that earlier in a meeting with Robert Dale Owen, who was a spiritualist, and he recorded it in a book called Footfalls on the Boundaries, which was released in the early 1860s. So the truth got lost somewhere along the line, even though we know on several other occasions the mother was really very strong in her view about what had occurred. And that pamphlet is now available, and it was really the source of when I suddenly realised what was wrong. It was refound and republished in the eminently good e-paper called Psi Pioneer, which Liz was actually on the editorial team of towards the end, and which Liz and I nearly ended up running if I had actually stopped work a little earlier than I was intending to, when Paul Gaunt, who's the archivist of the Spiritist National Union, and particularly of the Emma Harding Britton Library at the Arthur Findlay College, and the then other person involved in it, Leslie Price, was the archivist of the College of Psychic Studies. And Paul Gaunt found the original pamphlet and published it in Psi Pioneer, bringing the truth back out into the light. Sadly, after the book Missing Link had been published, everybody seemed to have taken that as the gospel. Well, it was an amazing day. The girls were critical in the first event, taking a note from the witness statement of the mother, Margaret Fox. She wrote her husband had gone to bed when the rapping commenced as usual. The girls who slept in the other bed in the room heard the noise and tried to make a similar noise by snapping their fingers. The youngest girl is about 12 years old. She's the one who made her hand go. As fast as she made the noise with her hands or fingers, the sound was followed up in the room. It did not sound any different at that time, only it made the same number of noises the girl did. When she stopped, the sound itself stopped for a short time. The other girl, who was in her 15th year, then spoke in sport and said, "Now do this just as I do. Count 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., striking one hand in the other at the same time. The blows which she made were repeated as before. It appeared to answer her by repeating every blow she made. She only did so once. She then began to be startled, so I spoke as the mother and said to the noise, 'Count 10, and it made 10 strokes or more.' Margaret went on and asked other questions and then sent out to get one of the neighbours, and progressively all the neighbours moved in to the house. Well, not all, but there was a large number of neighbours who came in, and they continued the conversation. She said many called in that night who were out fishing, and the same questions, and they all asked the questions, and the same questions were asked, frequently repeated, and the same answers were obtained. Some of them stayed there all night, but Mrs. Fox and the 2 children left before midnight and didn't come back till late next day. But in that time, Mr. William Hydesville had taken over the questioning as the lead man, and they kept forming committees and kept asking questions of this spirit without the children being there. So although the children were there and started the first communication, the communications went on for about a week with various people coming in and asking questions. And it was only, they did try digging in the cellar. You'll hear that they found bones in the cellar. They weren't found at the time. They were actually found in 1906 in a double cavity in the cottage. In the ruins of the cottage had been taken away, but the foundations were there. And they also, it was Mr. Hydesville who then tried to get the name of the peddler. And he said, "I then tried to ascertain the first letters of name." This is the record of Mr. Hydesville, letters of its name, by calling over the different letters, commencing with an A, but when it came to C, it was rapping. No other letter in the alphabet. I then asked in the same way in regard to the initial of its surname. The record there said it was B, which nobody else has ever come up with. The record that was produced by E. Lewis was quite outstanding. It defined what actually occurred, and he himself was very strongly of the opinion that his final comments, and he actually put a reward for anybody who could prove it was wrong. He said at the end, "These are the substance of the astounding developments that have recently come to light in that neighbourhood. Taken in connection with the unaccountable revelations that have been made by this mysterious rapping, who can longer doubt the supernatural origin of this noise?" He said many have been accused of carrying on this mysterious affair merely for their own amusement, and many like ourselves have visited the place in the full belief they'd be able to detect the imposition. They've all returned no wiser than they went. So that was the record after the events, and that was the start of spiritualism. But in fact it nearly died away. I've spent months, years researching this. I went through every paper on the internet, and suddenly out of the blue I found a little thing in 1849, but in October. But in that whole period from May 1848 to that time, there was very little about rappings anywhere in America. There was virtually no record of anything else going on, minor disturbances, but nothing specific. And then there was an article in a newspaper, the Tennessee newspaper, where George Willett, who was one of when the family moved to Rochester after these events, they formed a circle around an Isaac and Amy Post at their house, who had been friends. And in that circle, they had various people coming in who got information, and this rapping quietly went on as a group. And George Willett was one of this group and related by marriage to Amy Post, and he published an article in the Tennessee paper saying, we've had a contact with this spirit, and it was Charles Razmi, the first time that name had ever appeared. And then within 1 month the most important event from Spiritualism occurred, when at that stage Kate Fox was away with one of the families of the group around the Fox family, the Caprons, in Auburn, but Margaretta, supported by Leah, went on to do a public demonstration of mediumship at Corinthian Hall in Rochester. This had been asked for by Spirit in their circle. They even had some writing about it, of what to do, and they bravely put themselves up there. Particularly brave as an article by George Willets again in 1851 revealed that in fact Leah was not a medium, that nothing occurred in her presence, no rapping, nothing, and that it was really Margaretta who did it on her own. And in fact they published the name of Charles Razmi in the hope before the demonstration they might get some contact from the people whose family he belonged to, but they hadn't received anything. But at Rochester they demonstrated, and over 3 on the first night, and then Margaretta and Leah were investigated on 3 consecutive days, or 1 night and 2 days, and no fraud was found. And the committees had to sign that they believed the truth, that there was no physical explanation for the rappings that were coming. And that really kick-started Spiritualism, because in 1850 the girls were invited to New York. The editor of the New York Tribune accepted their story. Horace Greeley, he actually supported them. He wrote an article as they moved out of New York, leaving it, that he believed in their honesty and their trustworthiness. So Spiritualism started. So a very, very important story. There's a lot more I could say. I could probably talk forever on this, as everybody knows, but I think that's enough for that. So I hope you enjoyed that little intro to how we started Spiritualism. And now I haven't got any notices. I'll see what happens next week. I might try, and Barry Gray was going to be our medium next week, I might try and get him to record a talk for you, or do something different. There will be a little chance for you to get messages. I'm going to ask you to choose a colour. There's going to be a colour wheel picture on our Facebook page. If you like to, you could even look at that. You could even use a pendulum to choose your colour. I would ask you to choose an overt colour like red, not a half colour. We really need the colours of the rainbow: the indigo, violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange and red, if you would. And you could try a pendulum. Ask the question when you've got the pendulum in your hand. Okay. Check you know which way is yes and no. Always ask an obvious question which you know the answer to, and see which way the pendulum turns if you want a yes answer. So I always ask, am I a woman? Which hopefully I'm not. I've never noticed that. And then you really have to ask 2 other questions. May I ask this question? Once you establish yes, and see if you get a yes answer. And am I allowed to ask this question? Because it's important that you check whether you can actually receive an answer for any question on the pendulum. You should always assume that anything personal shouldn't be asked, because you're likely to influence, because you might have knowledge. So at that stage, I'll leave this today, and thank you all, those of you who listen to us. Thank you. Bye.